I'm Stephanie Allen, 28, a senior software engineer at a tech startup in Seattle. I'm known for my methodical approach to problem solving and for the way I tend to internalize conflict rather than confront it head-on. The coffee mug shattered against the kitchen wall behind my head, ceramic fragments raining down like angry tears. My mother's face was twisted into something I'd never seen before, pure, venomous disappointment mixed with a rage that made her hands shake. Selfish, she spat, her voice cracking on the word. Your own sister, Stephanie. Your own flesh and blood. The smell of spilled coffee mixed with the lingering scent of my father's aftershave as he stepped between us, his usually gentle hands now clenched into fists at his sides. But he wasn't protecting me. He was restraining himself from saying something worse. 23 years we raised you. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than Mom's screaming. 23 years, and this is how you repay us? When your sister needs you most? I stood there in their pristine kitchen, still wearing my work clothes from the emergency family meeting they'd called, watching my parents transform into strangers. The granite countertops that had witnessed countless family dinners now felt like courtroom benches. The family photos on the refrigerator, all those smiling faces from birthdays and holidays, seemed to mock me from their magnetic prisons. I'm not abandoning anyone. I finally managed, my voice sounding foreign in my own ears. I just can't. Can't what? Mom's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut glass. Can't help your sister save her company? The company she's poured her heart into for 3 years? The company that could change everything for our family? My sister Emma sat at the kitchen island, her laptop open to spreadsheets I couldn't read from where I stood. She hadn't looked up once during the entire confrontation, her fingers typing steadily as if the numbers on her screen were more important than the family imploding around her. Her dark hair fell like a curtain, hiding her expression, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Stephanie. Dad's voice pulled my attention back. Your sister needs $40,000. You have it sitting in your savings account doing nothing. How is this even a question? The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a physical thing. I could feel my chest tightening, my breathing becoming shallow. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm, too full of accusations and assumptions. It's not that simple, I whispered. It is that simple. Mom slammed her palm against the counter, making Emma's laptop jump. Family helps family. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. But that wasn't true, was it? When I needed help with college tuition, I'd worked 3 jobs and taken out loans. When I'd been laid off 2 years ago and couldn't make rent, I'd slept on a friend's couch rather than ask them for money. When I'd wanted to start my own consulting business, they told me to be practical, to keep my stable job, to stop dreaming so big. Family helps family, but only when it was convenient. Only when it fit their narrative. I need some air, I said, moving toward the back door. Don't you dare walk away from this conversation, Dad called after me, but I was already stepping onto the deck. The October evening was crisp, carrying the scent of dying leaves and the distant promise of rain. I gripped the wooden railing and tried to steady my breathing, tried to make sense of what had just happened. 3 hours ago, I'd been debugging code at my desk, thinking about what to make for dinner. Now I was standing in the wreckage of my family relationships, accused of crimes I didn't understand. Through the kitchen window, I could see them huddled around Emma's laptop, their voices muffled but their gestures animated. Planning, strategizing, figuring out how to make me see reason, how to make me comply. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my best friend Sarah. How did the family dinner go? Still on for drinks later. I stared at the message, realizing I couldn't even begin to explain what had just transpired. How do you tell someone that your parents had just asked you to hand over your entire life savings, money you've been carefully accumulating for a house down payment, for security, for the future you've been building one careful dollar at a time, and when you hesitated, they treated you like a traitor? The back door opened behind me, and I heard Emma's footsteps on the deck. She moved to stand beside me at the railing, close enough that I could smell her familiar perfume, the same vanilla scent she'd worn since high school. They're scared, she said quietly, her voice carrying none of the accusation that had filled the kitchen. The company, it's not just my dream anymore, Steph. I have 12 employees depending on me. 12 families. I turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time all evening. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect makeup couldn't quite hide the stress lines around her mouth. When had she gotten so thin? What aren't you telling me? I asked. Emma's hands tightened on the railing. What do you mean? This whole thing. The emergency meeting, the desperation, the way Mom and Dad are acting like I'm personally destroying the family by not immediately writing you a check. What's really going on? For a moment, I thought she might tell me. Her mouth opened, and I saw something flicker across her face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But then she straightened, and the mask slipped back into place. I told you. Cash flow problems. We just need to bridge the gap until our next round of funding comes through. And if it doesn't come through? Emma was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the wind rustling through the maple trees. Then I lose everything. Before I could respond, the back door burst open and Mom appeared, her face flushed with anger and something that looked like panic. There's someone here to see you, Emma, she said, her voice tight. Someone from the bank. Emma went rigid beside me, her face draining of color so quickly I thought she might faint.
Now.
Emma whispered. They said I had until Monday. Who said you had until Monday? I demanded, but Emma was already pushing past me, rushing toward the house. I followed them inside, my heart pounding with a dread I couldn't name. In the living room, a man in an expensive suit stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the family photos on the mantel. He turned when we entered, and his smile was the kind that never reached the eyes. Miss Allen, he said, extending his hand to Emma. I'm sorry to disturb your family gathering, but we need to discuss your loan status immediately. Emma's hand shook as she took his. I thought we agreed. Circumstances have changed, the man interrupted smoothly. We've received some concerning information about your company's financial statements. Information that suggests the numbers you provided us may not have been entirely accurate. The room went dead silent. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Emma's face had gone from pale to gray, and she swayed slightly on her feet. I don't understand, Dad said, stepping forward. What kind of information? The man's smile widened, and I felt ice form in my stomach. The kind that suggests your daughter may have been running a very sophisticated operation, he said, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. The kind that means we need our money back immediately, or we'll be forced to involve law enforcement. Emma made a sound like a wounded animal, and suddenly I understood why my parents had been so desperate, why they'd been willing to destroy our family dinner to get my money. They hadn't been trying to save Emma's company. They'd been trying to save Emma from prison. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Emma's breathing had become shallow, rapid gasps that filled the space between the banker's words and my parents' horrified expressions. I watched my sister, the sister I'd shared a bedroom with for 16 years, who taught me how to braid my hair and helped me with calculus, transform into someone I didn't recognize. There's been a mistake, Emma whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. The financial statements are accurate. I can show you. Miss Allen. The banker's tone was patient but firm, like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. We've had forensic accountants review your books. The discrepancies are significant. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed with confusion and rising anger. Now wait just a minute. My daughter runs a legitimate business. She's been transparent about everything. Has she? The banker turned those cold eyes on my father. Mr. Allen, were you aware that your daughter's company has been reporting revenue from contracts that don't exist? That she's been using new investor money to pay back previous investors? That's called a Ponzi scheme, and it's a federal crime. The words hit the room like physical blows. Mom sank into her favorite armchair, the one she'd reupholstered last spring in cheerful yellow fabric that now seemed obscenely bright against the darkness settling over our family. Dad's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. But it was Emma's reaction that made my blood run cold. She didn't deny it. She didn't rage or protest or demand proof. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking like a child who'd been caught stealing from the cookie jar. How long? I heard myself ask, my voice sounding distant and strange. Emma's eyes met mine for the first time since the banker had arrived. Steph, I can explain. How long have you been lying to us? It wasn't supposed to go this far, she whispered. It started small. Just a few numbers adjusted here and there to make the company look more stable for investors. But then the real contracts fell through, and I had to keep adjusting, keep finding new money to cover the gaps. The banker cleared his throat. Ms. Allen, I need to inform you that we'll be freezing all accounts associated with your business as of tomorrow morning. You have until then to make arrangements for the return of our loan. All $200,000 of it. $200,000. I felt the number hit me like a physical blow. Emma hadn't been asking for $40,000 to save her company. She'd been asking for $40,000 to buy herself time before the whole house of cards came crashing down. We don't have that kind of money, Dad said, his voice hollow. Then I suggest you contact a criminal defense attorney, the banker replied, tucking a business card into his jacket pocket. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit will likely be in touch within the week. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at Emma with something that might have been pity. For what it's worth, Ms. Allen, you're not the first young entrepreneur to get in over their head. But the law doesn't care about good intentions. The front door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence that followed. Emma collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Mom rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her daughter, like she could somehow shield her from what was coming. We'll figure this out, Mom murmured, stroking Emma's hair. We'll find a way. Families stick together. But Dad was staring at Emma like he'd never seen her before. $200,000, he said slowly. Emma, how could you? How could you put us all at risk like this? I didn't mean to. Emma's voice was muffled against Mom's shoulder. It was supposed to work. The technology is real. The product is good. I just needed more time to make it profitable. By lying to investors? By stealing their money? I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing against future success. Lots of startups do it. No. Dad's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. Lots of startups don't commit fraud, Emma. They don't build their dreams on lies. I found myself backing toward the kitchen, needing space to process what I'd just learned. My sister, my brilliant, ambitious sister who'd graduated summa cum laude from business school, who'd always been the golden child, the one with the plan, was a criminal. And my parents had known something was wrong. They'd known enough to be desperate, to attack me for not immediately handing over my savings. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter where Mom had slammed her palm just an hour ago, when the worst thing I'd thought I was dealing with was family pressure to make a bad financial decision. Now I understood why they'd been so frantic, so angry. They hadn't been asking me to invest in Emma's company. They'd been asking me to help her cover up a crime. My phone buzzed again. Sarah, wondering where I was. I stared at the screen, trying to imagine explaining this to anyone. Sorry I'm late for drinks. My sister's been running a Ponzi scheme, and the FBI is probably going to arrest her. Stephanie. Emma's voice came from the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like the confession had physically shrunk her. I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. I turned to face her, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. How long have you known it was falling apart? Months. The word came out as barely a whisper. Maybe 6 months. I kept thinking I could turn it around, that I could make the numbers work if I just had a little more time, a little more money. And Mom and Dad? How long have they known? Emma's silence was answer enough. They've known for months, I said, the pieces clicking into place. That's why they've been so weird lately. Why Mom kept asking about my job, my savings. Why Dad suggested I move back home to save money. You've all been planning this. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Emma? The anger was building now, hot and clean and righteous. Because from where I'm standing, It looks like you committed fraud, told our parents, and then the three of you decided the best solution was to manipulate me into funding your cover-up. Emma flinched like I'd slapped her. We were trying to protect you. If you didn't know the details, you couldn't be implicated. Implicated? The word came out as a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Emma, you just tried to make me an accessory to a federal crime. You were going to take my money I've been saving for years, and use it to help you evade justice. I was going to pay you back. With what money? You just admitted your company is built on lies. Emma's composure finally cracked completely. She slid down the doorframe until she was sitting on the kitchen floor, her expensive business suit wrinkled and her carefully styled hair falling around her face in tangles. I'm going to prison, she whispered. I'm going to lose everything, and I'm going to prison, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. I stared down at my sister, this person I'd looked up to my entire life, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The Emma I'd known, confident, successful, always 3 steps ahead, had never existed. She'd been a carefully constructed lie, just like her company. You're right, I said quietly. There's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Because you did this, Emma. You made these choices. I walked past her, stepping carefully around her crumpled form, and headed for the front door. Behind me, I could hear Mom and Dad's voices rising in the living room, panic and recrimination mixing into a toxic cocktail of family dysfunction. Where are you going? Emma called after me. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Home. To my apartment that I pay for with money I earned honestly. To my life that isn't built on lies. Stephanie, please. But I was already walking out into the October night, leaving behind the wreckage of everything I'd thought I knew about my family. The air was sharp and clean, carrying the promise of rain, and for the first time all evening, I could breathe. I was halfway to my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Dad's voice called out across the driveway, desperate and broken. Stephanie, wait. We need to talk about this as a family. I turned around slowly, keys in my hand, and looked at the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with my math homework, who'd told me that honesty was the most important virtue a person could have. No, Dad, I said. We really don't. I was pulling out of the driveway when my phone rang. The caller ID made my blood freeze. It was my boss. At 9:30 on a Friday night, my boss was calling me. And given what had just happened, given what I now knew about Emma's company and the investigation that was coming, there was only one reason he would be calling. Someone had connected me to Emma's fraud. I pulled over 3 blocks from my parents' house, my hands shaking as I answered the phone. The streetlight above cast harsh shadows through my windshield, and I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Stephanie. My boss Marcus's voice was tight, professional in a way that made my stomach drop. I need you to come in tonight. We have a situation. Marcus, it's almost 10 o'clock on a Friday. I know what time it is. His tone cut through my protest like ice. Stephanie, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Have you had any involvement with your sister's company, Nexus Solutions? The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. What kind of involvement? Any kind. Financial, technical, advisory. Anything at all. No. The word came out stronger than I felt. Marcus, what's going on? There was a long pause, filled with the sound of papers rustling and muffled voices in the background. The FBI contacted us an hour ago. They're investigating Nexus Solutions for securities fraud, and your name came up in their preliminary review. Apparently, some of the code architecture in their platform bears striking similarities to proprietary algorithms we developed for the Morrison account. My blood turned to ice water. That's impossible. Is it? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Because I'm looking at side-by-side comparisons right now, Stephanie. The core authentication protocols are nearly identical. Either this is the most incredible coincidence in software development history, or someone with access to our systems provided your sister with our intellectual property. I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing. Emma's company was a fintech startup, something to do with automated investment platforms. I'd never paid close attention to the technical details because I'd trusted her. Because she was my sister, and I'd assumed she was building something legitimate. Marcus, I swear to you, I never gave Emma anything. I've never even seen her code. Then how do you explain this? I can't. The admission felt like swallowing glass. But I didn't do what you're suggesting. The FBI wants to interview you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at their field office downtown. And Stephanie. His voice softened slightly, but the steel remained. Until this is resolved, you're suspended. Security will escort you up to clean out your desk. The line went dead. I sat in my car under the streetlight, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 3 hours, I'd learned that my sister was a criminal, my parents were complicit in her crimes, and now I was being accused of corporate espionage. The life I'd carefully built, my career, my reputation, my future, was crumbling around me like a house made of sand. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Allen, this is Agent Sarah Chin with the FBI. We need to speak with you urgently regarding your sister's company and your potential involvement. Please call me immediately. I stared at the message, my hands trembling. The FBI. They thought I was part of Emma's scheme. They thought I'd stolen from my own company to help her build her house of lies. Another text, this one from Emma. Steph, please come back. Something terrible has happened. The FBI was just here. They have a warrant. I turned off my phone. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and stop signs that I barely registered. My apartment building looked the same as always. Red brick, ivy climbing the walls, the security light by the entrance flickering like it had for months. But everything felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that my entire world had shifted while I wasn't looking. Inside my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and tried to think. The code similarities Marcus had mentioned. How was that possible? I'd never shared anything with Emma. I'd never even discussed my work with her in detail, beyond general complaints about difficult clients or long hours. Unless I set down my wine glass and walked to my home office, a converted bedroom where I sometimes worked on freelance projects. My laptop sat on the desk, closed and innocent-looking. But next to it was something that made my blood run cold. A USB drive. One I didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, I picked it up. It was small, black, unremarkable except for a tiny piece of tape on the side with essay, written in Emma's handwriting. My initials. When had she been in my apartment? When had she had access to my computer? The memory hit me like a physical blow. 3 months ago, Emma had stayed with me for a weekend while her apartment was being fumigated. She'd been working on her laptop in my office, said she needed the quiet to focus on some important presentations. I'd given her my Wi-Fi password, told her to make herself at home. I'd trusted her. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop with hands that felt disconnected from my body. The contents made me sick. Dozens of files, all with names I recognized from my work at the company. Source code, algorithm specifications, client data, everything Emma would have needed to build a convincing fintech platform. She hadn't just stolen from investors. She'd stolen from me. My phone, which I'd turned back on, started ringing. Emma's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message with a growing sense of unreality. Steph, I know you're angry, but please listen to me. The FBI searched the house. They took everything, computers, phones, financial records. They asked about you specifically. They know about the code similarities. I try to tell them you weren't involved, but they think you were my technical partner. Please call me back. We need to figure out how to handle this. I deleted the message and immediately called my lawyer. Well, the lawyer who'd handled my lease agreements and helped me set up my freelance business. David Reeves was a good man, but I wasn't sure he was equipped for federal fraud charges. Stephanie. David's voice was groggy with sleep. What's wrong? David, I need help. The FBI thinks I'm involved in a securities fraud case, and I'm being suspended from my job and my sister. I took a shaky breath. My sister stole proprietary code from my company and used it to build a fraudulent business. There was a long pause. Stephanie, I need you to stop talking right now. Don't say another word about this to anyone, not your family, not your coworkers, not the FBI. I'm going to refer you to a colleague who specializes in white-collar criminal defense. Her name is Patricia Vance, and she's the best in the city. David, I didn't do anything wrong. That doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you're being investigated for federal crimes, and you need representation immediately. Patricia will meet with you first thing in the morning, before your FBI interview. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the USB drive, this small piece of plastic that represented the complete destruction of my life. Emma had used me. She'd violated my trust, stolen my work, and then tried to manipulate me into funding her escape when it all fell apart. And the worst part? My parents had known. They'd known she was using stolen code, known she was building her company on lies, and they'd still tried to guilt me into helping her. I thought about the banker's words. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit will likely be in touch within a week. He'd been wrong. They'd been in touch within hours. My phone rang again. This time it was Mom. Stephanie, sweetheart, please come home. Emma told us what happened with your job. We need to stick together as a family right now. I almost laughed. Stick together? Mom, Emma stole from my company. She used code I had access to and built her fraud around it. The FBI thinks I'm her accomplice. That's impossible. Emma would never. Emma would never what? Lie? Steal? Commit fraud? My voice was rising, months of suppressed frustration finally breaking free. Because she's done all of those things, Mom. And you knew. You've known for months that something was wrong, and instead of getting her help, you decided to make it my problem. We were trying to protect both of you. No. The word came out flat and final. You were trying to protect Emma. You were willing to sacrifice me to save her, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me what I was really being asked to do. I hung up and turned off my phone again. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally began, pattering against my windows like tiny fingers tapping for attention. I poured another glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring out at the city lights blurred by water and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Tomorrow, I would meet with Patricia Vance. Tomorrow, I would sit across from FBI agents and try to convince them that I wasn't a criminal. Tomorrow, I would begin the long process of rebuilding my life from the wreckage my sister had made of it. But tonight, I just sat in the dark and let myself grieve for the family I'd thought I had, the sister I'd thought I knew, and the future I'd thought was mine. The USB drive sat on my coffee table like a small black accusation. Evidence of betrayal, proof of theft, the key to understanding how my life had been stolen from me while I wasn't looking. I picked it up and walked to my kitchen, where I dropped it into the garbage disposal and flipped the switch. The grinding sound was satisfying, final. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever the FBI thought they knew, Emma's theft of my work would die with that drive. It was a small act of defiance, but it was mine. As I stood there listening to the disposal destroy the evidence of my sister's betrayal, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, I was discovering, was much more useful than fear. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, and I began to plan. 3 days later, I sat in Patricia Vance's office, watching her review the FBI's case file with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. She was exactly what David had promised, sharp, experienced, and completely unimpressed by federal prosecutors who built cases on circumstantial evidence. They have nothing, she said finally, closing the folder. Code similarities aren't proof of theft, especially when they can't demonstrate how you allegedly transferred the information. Your sister's financial records show no payments to you, no evidence of partnership or collaboration. And most importantly, she smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who just spotted wounded prey. Your sister's own statements to the FBI actually exonerate you. What do you mean? Emma Allen has been very cooperative with federal investigators. Perhaps too cooperative. In her eagerness to minimize her own culpability, she's provided detailed explanations of how she built her platform. According to her sworn statements, she developed all the code herself, using only publicly available resources and her own programming knowledge. I stared at Patricia, not quite believing what I was hearing. She's denying that she stole from my company? More than that, she's claiming the similarities are coincidental, the result of industry-standard approaches to common problems. She's essentially arguing that great minds think alike. Patricia's smile widened. Which means she can't very well claim you were her accomplice in stealing code. She insists she never stole. The irony was perfect. Emma's pathological need to be seen as brilliant, as the sole architect of her success, had become the very thing that cleared me of suspicion. She couldn't admit to theft without admitting she wasn't the genius she'd always claimed to be. So, what happens now? Now, you go back to your life. The FBI is closing their investigation into your involvement. Your company will likely offer you your job back, probably with a raise and an apology. And your sister. Patricia's expression grew serious. Your sister is going to prison for a very long time. I walked out of Patricia's office into a Seattle afternoon that felt different than any I'd experienced before. The air was cleaner, the colors brighter. The weight of accusation and suspicion finally lifted from my shoulders. I had my life back. But as I stood on the sidewalk, watching people hurry past with their own problems and secrets, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The family I'd grown up believing in, the one where love was unconditional and loyalty ran both ways, had never really existed. It had been as much of a construction as Emma's fraudulent company, built on assumptions and wishful thinking rather than truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Stephanie, please call us. Emma's sentencing is next week. She needs her family now more than ever." I deleted the message without responding. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay that way. 6 months later, I was promoted to senior technical lead at my company, with a salary increase that finally made my house down payment a reality. Emma was serving a 7-year sentence at a federal prison in Oregon, and my parents had stopped calling. I bought a house in a neighborhood I'd always loved, with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and a home office with windows that faced east toward the mountains. On quiet Sunday mornings, I made coffee and sat in my kitchen, reading the news and planning my week, surrounded by the peace that comes from building a life on truth rather than lies. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about my contentment, about how easily I'd walked away from the wreckage of my family. But then I remembered the USB drive, the betrayal, the willingness to sacrifice me for Emma's crimes, and I knew I'd made the right choice. Family was supposed to be about love and support and protection. But sometimes, the most loving thing you could do was refuse to enable someone's destruction of themselves and everyone around them. I'd learned to tell the difference. And that knowledge, hard-won and painful as it was, had set me free.